If you think your boss is a nightmare, you are about to feel a lot better about your life. We dug up the places where sighing is illegal, bathroom breaks are timed with a stopwatch, and forced fun is a threat, not a perk. Here are 49 real, dumbest documented policies that prove corporate America has completely lost its mind. 1. Some corporate genius decided that no is just a suggestion until it has been rejected 3 separate times. A tech support center enforced a policy requiring agents to ask, "Is there anything else I can help you with?" exactly 3 times before they were allowed to hang up. It didn't matter if the customer was already screaming at the top of their lungs or threatening to cancel their service. The poor agent had to stand their ground and repeat the script like a broken, suicidal robot. By the 3rd time, it wasn't customer service anymore. It was a verbal hostage situation designed to make sure you never, ever called back. 2. Nothing kills an appetite quite like mandatory socialization with coworkers you actively try to avoid in the hallway. An ad agency decided to improve morale by instituting forced fun lunchtimes. Departments were assigned specific restaurants and times, and opting out was strictly forbidden. You were essentially drafted into a culinary prison sentence. Imagine trying to enjoy your lukewarm sushi while Brenda from Accounts Receivable explains her fungal infection in vivid detail for 45 minutes. You couldn't leave, you couldn't hide, and you definitely couldn't enjoy your food. It turns out, forcing people to eat together is a great way to create indigestion and deep-seated resentment. 3. There are control freaks. And then there is the manager at this company who apparently thought he was a feudal lord. He implemented a strict rule that no one in the department could leave for the day until he packed up and left first. It didn't matter if your work was done hours ago or if your cat was on fire. If the boss decided to sit there and browse golf forums until 7 at night, the entire team had to sit in silence and watch him. It was a power trip so massive, it probably had its own gravitational pull, turning grown adults into kindergartners waiting for the bell to ring. 4. In a misguided attempt to embrace radical transparency, a tech company thought it would be brilliant to install a live streaming webcam overlooking the entire open-plan office. The feed was accessible to every employee's desktop, effectively turning the workplace into the world's most boring reality show. The idea was to prove everyone was working, but in practice, it just meant your every yawn, scratch, and covert nose pick was broadcast to the entire building. It created a level of paranoia, usually reserved for Cold War spies, with everyone terrified to move a muscle lest they become the star of the internal blooper reel. 5. You cannot schedule an epiphany, but that didn't stop this company from trying to squeeze innovation out of their staff like the last drop of toothpaste. They required every employee to submit a good idea form once a month to keep their job. Naturally, people don't have 12 genius business-altering ideas a year. By month 4, the suggestion box was filled with absolute garbage just to meet the quota. We are talking suggestions like replace the stairs with a slide, mandatory nap time, or fire the guy who invented this form. It was malicious compliance at its finest. 6. There is upselling, and then there is harassment over a slice of cheesecake. A chain restaurant enforced a strategic temptation policy where servers had to offer dessert to a table at least 3 times, even after a firm refusal. It turned every meal into an awkward interrogation. You would say, "No thanks," and the server, terrified of a secret shopper, would have to ask, "Are you sure? It's really good." And then again. It reached a point where customers wanted to file a restraining order just to pay the check in peace. The only thing this policy successfully served up was a heaping side of anxiety. 7. Holiday spirit is usually something you feel, not something that is issued to you in a plastic baggie. One particularly controlling office manager decided that desk decorations were mandatory, but you were strictly forbidden from bringing your own. You had to use the approved kit, which contained 2 sad strands of tinsel, a bent paper clip, and a single, pathetic candy cane. That was it. It looked less like a festive celebration and more like Christmas in a Soviet labor camp. Nothing screams, Happy holidays, quite like state-sanctioned, standardized cheer that leaves everyone feeling more depressed than before they started. 8. Your computer screen is the one thing you have to look at all day, so naturally this company wanted to make it as painful as possible. They locked down all the computers with a mandatory screensaver that was just a high-contrast looping animation of the corporate logo. It couldn't be changed, muted, or stopped. If you paused for 2 minutes to think, the logo would start spinning, burning itself into your retinas. It was like a low-grade brainwashing technique. Employees reported seeing that logo when they closed their eyes at night, which I am pretty sure is grounds for a workers' compensation claim for psychological damage. 9. You know bureaucracy has gone too far when getting a ballpoint pen requires the same level of security clearance as buying a firearm. At one company, if your pen ran out of ink, you couldn't just grab a new one. You had to fill out a 3-page requisition form, get signatures from 2 different department heads, and then wait through a mandatory 48-hour cooling-off period. Apparently, management was terrified that employees might make a rash decision in the heat of the moment and hoard office supplies. By the time you actually got the pen, you had forgotten what you needed to write down in the first place. 10. One major retail chain decided to wage war on the basic concept of human comfort by banning chairs entirely. Employees were forbidden from sitting down at any point during their 8-hour shift, even if the store was completely empty at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. The corporate logic was that standing made them look perpetually ready for action. Action for what? Restocking the shampoo aisle? This wasn't the Navy SEALs, it was a discount department store. The only thing this policy actually accomplished was ensuring that every single cashier developed deep vein thrombosis and a burning hatred for management. 11. Forced happiness is the creepiest kind of happiness. A fast food franchise implemented a strict policy requiring employees to maintain a continuous, unwavering smile for their entire shift. Managers would actually conduct smile checks during the lunch rush. If your grin faltered for a second, you were told to turn that frown upside down. Try smiling like a maniac while you're scraping burnt cheese off a grill or getting yelled at because the ice cream machine is broken again. It gave the whole restaurant the vibe of a psychological horror movie where everyone is secretly screaming on the inside. 12. In a world where business casual is the norm, one particularly stuffy office decided to double down on the Victorian era. Men were required to wear ties at all times, with 0 exceptions. When Casual Friday rolled around, they weren't allowed to take the ties off. Instead, the policy generously allowed for ties of a whimsical nature. This didn't make the office more relaxed. It just meant you had to conduct serious business meetings while wearing a silk noose covered in cartoon pigs or Tabasco sauce bottles. It was forced whimsy, which is the exact opposite of actual fun. 13. Scripting employee interactions is standard, but this retail store took it to a dystopian level. Every single interaction had to end with the specific phrase, "Have a magical day." It didn't matter what had just happened. If a customer had just spent 20 minutes screaming at you about an expired coupon for cat litter, you still had to look them in the eye and wish them a magical day. Saying "have a good one" or just "goodbye" was a write-up offense. It's the kind of passive-aggressive corporate mandate that slowly chips away at your soul, one magical utterance at a time. 14. There is respecting your elders, and then there is acting like you are living in a 1950s sitcom. One old-fashioned company mandated that all employees address senior management as Mr. Shen or Ms., followed by their last name, even in the break room. Using a first name was considered a grievous act of insubordination punishable by a stern lecture on respecting the hierarchy. You could work with a guy for 15 years, know his wife's name and his cholesterol level, but if you called him Bob instead of Mr. Smith, you were treated like you just tried to burn the building down. 15. Aggressive hospitality can be terrifying. A gourmet grocery store had a zero-tolerance policy where employees had to offer every single customer a sample of the artisanal cheese of the day. It didn't matter if the customer was clearly in a rush, on the phone, or lactose intolerant. Resistance was futile. The employees had to push that Gouda like their lives depended on it. It turned a simple grocery run into an awkward confrontation where you had to dodge dairy samples like you were avoiding a process server. Sometimes you just want to buy a banana without engaging in a cheese-based negotiation. 16. A corporate behemoth reached new heights of pettiness when they banned employees from charging their personal cell phones in the office outlets. The memo cited unforeseen gigawatt-level fiscal burdens, which is a fancy way of saying they were too cheap to pay the extra 3 cents a year per person. They genuinely suggested that employees invest in solar-powered chargers or portable battery packs to save the company money. It's amazing they didn't ask staff to bring in their own toilet paper to reduce fiber-based operational overhead. 17. Forced nonconformity is a special kind of paradox. A tech startup, desperate to prove how quirky and disruptive they were, mandated that all employees wear brightly colored mismatched socks on Fridays. It wasn't a fun suggestion, it was a rule. If you came in with standard beige or black socks, you were sent to HR for a culture fit recalibration. Nothing screams, "We are a fun, free-thinking company," quite like inspecting your employees' ankles to ensure they are adhering to the mandatory wackiness guidelines. 18. In an effort to strip away the last shreds of individuality, one office banned all personal coffee mugs. They decreed that only the company-issued soul-crushingly identical white ceramic cylinders could be used on the premises. The break room looked less like a cafe and more like a mess hall in a dystopian sci-fi movie. One brave rebel dared to bring in a bright pink flamingo mug and was reportedly given a final written warning for displaying excessive personality. Apparently, drinking from a cup that didn't look like it was made in a government lab was a threat to corporate synergy. 19. Micromanagement usually stops at the bathroom door, but not at this notorious tech firm. They allegedly mandated a 2-flush minimum for all employees. Management claimed a single flush lacked the commitment to excellence they strove for in all aspects of business. You can just picture the HR meeting where they drafted the "flush like you mean it" policy. It's the kind of rule that makes you wonder if the CEO is watching from a secret control room, nodding approvingly as the water bill skyrockets in the name of corporate perfection. 20. Status is everything, but one company took it to the parking lot. They assigned parking spots based strictly on salary bands, which were public knowledge. The executives got the covered spots near the door, while the entry-level employees were forced to park in a satellite lot 3 blocks away. It was a daily, muddy reminder of your place in the food chain. You didn't just need a promotion to get a raise, you needed one to keep your shoes clean and dry. 21. Micromanagement reached a new low at an accounting firm where the color of your ink was a matter of national security. Employees were strictly forbidden from using red ink pens for anything. Red ink was the exclusive domain of senior partners, reserved solely for marking errors on official documents. If you were caught jotting down a phone number or a grocery list in red, it was treated as an act of open rebellion. It was a silent, crimson scream against the system, punished with the kind of severity usually reserved for embezzlement or corporate espionage. 22. A logistics company decided that basic biological functions were just inefficient downtime that needed to be optimized. They limited bathroom breaks to a cumulative total of 20 minutes per week. Yes, per week. That averages out to less than 4 minutes a day. They allegedly issued bathroom punch cards to track usage. I don't know who came up with this, but they clearly have never had a morning coffee or a functioning digestive system. It turned every trip to the restroom into a high-stakes race against the clock, where the penalty for losing was either unemployment or a very embarrassing accident. 23. Digital vanity reached new heights at a marketing firm that mandated mandatory engagement for all employees. You were contractually obligated to like and share every single post from the company's LinkedIn and Facebook pages within 2 hours of publication. Yes, even on weekends. Failure to amplify the corporate brand resulted in a lack of team spirit citation. It turned the entire workforce into a click farm of forced enthusiasm. ensuring that the company's posts had hundreds of likes, all from people who were secretly rolling their eyes so hard it hurt. 24. And now for the pièce de resistance of petty tyranny. A company that actually banned audible sighing. That's right. The simple, involuntary act of exhaling your frustration was a punishable offense. Apparently, hearing employees express their will to live, leaving their bodies was bad for morale. You could practically hear the sound of 1,000 souls screaming internally, their despair trapped behind clenched teeth. It was a rule designed to create a Stepford Wives atmosphere, where everyone is smiling on the outside while plotting the downfall of civilization on the inside. 25. Formatting is important, but this company treated Microsoft Word settings like religious doctrine. They insisted that every single internal document be double-spaced, in 12-point Times New Roman, with exactly 1-inch margins on all sides. If you deviated by a fraction of an inch, your report was rejected for formatting non-compliance. It didn't matter if the content solved world hunger. If the margins were 0.9 inches, it was trash. It was the tyranny of the ruler, literally, turning grown professionals into anxious high school students terrified of getting a C- on their term paper. 26. Emotions have no place in business, apparently. One company banned the use of exclamation points in all internal emails because they were deemed unprofessional and overly emotional. You couldn't say "great job" or "thanks." Everything had to be as flat and joyless as a concrete slab. Good work on the report. The building is on fire. I am quitting. It forced everyone to sound like a depressed robot. Communication became a sterile wasteland where enthusiasm went to die, replaced by the crushing weight of a properly punctuated period. 27. A major corporation decided to fight human nature by rolling out a strict no internal gossip policy. To enforce this, they created an anonymous tip line where you could report offenders. The irony, of course, was immediate and delicious. The tip line was instantly flooded with reports, not about co-workers, but about the CEO's rumored affair with the head of HR. The anti-gossip tool became the company's most efficient gossip conduit, proving once and for all that if you try to stop people from talking, they will just shout louder. 28. Open offices are noisy hellscapes, but one company banned headphones entirely, claiming they created barriers to collaboration. Instead, they piped in a loop of royalty-free, upbeat corporate jazz at a volume just loud enough to prevent concentration. Employees were forced to listen to a saxophone solo having a breakdown for 8 hours a day. It wasn't collaboration. It was a collective descent into auditory madness. 29. Bureaucracy is at its best when it complicates the simplest tasks. Imagine a workplace where adjusting the blinds required a written request submitted with 24 hours notice. This request then went to a daylight distribution committee for approval. By the time you got permission to lower the shade because the sun was blinding you, it was already pitch black outside. It turned the act of blocking a sunbeam into a legislative process, proving that some companies would rather let their employees go blind than give up an ounce of control. 30. In a misguided attempt to save the planet, one eco-conscious company banned all disposable cups. Employees had to bring their own reusable mugs. This sounds noble until you realize the communal dishwasher had been broken since the turn of the century. The break room sink became a biological hazard zone, a festering swamp of unwashed mugs and mold cultures. Instead of saving the environment, they just created a new ecosystem of bacteria. Employees were saving the turtles but risking dysentery with every sip of coffee. 31. Micromanagement extends to the bathroom stall in some places. One company dictated the precise brand and ply of toilet paper allowed in the restrooms. Bringing in anything else was considered contraband. An employee once smuggled in a roll of quilted luxury paper because the company issue stuff was essentially sandpaper, and they were reportedly lectured on supply chain consistency and its impact on quarterly earnings. You really have to question a business model where the profit margins depend on chafing your employees. 32. Robotizing the workforce is a common goal, but this customer service center took it literally. They forbade employees from using contractions in any communication. You are not instead of you're not. I am instead of I'm. It made every conversation sound stilted, awkward, and vaguely threatening. I am understanding your concern. It is unfortunate that your package is lost. It sounded less like helpful service and more like you were speaking to an alien trying to pass as human. It stripped away all natural rapport and replaced it with rigid, grammatical agony. 33. Linguistic control is usually the hallmark of a cult, but for this sales department it was just Tuesday. Management strictly banned the use of negative words like problem, issue, or failure. Instead, employees had to frame everything as an opportunity or a challenge. So you couldn't say, "The server crashed and we lost all the data." You had to say, "We have an exciting opportunity to rebuild our database from scratch." It was Orwellian newspeak designed to mask incompetence with a veneer of toxic positivity. 34. Refusing to adapt to technology is a bold strategy. An old-school ad agency insisted that all client presentations be done using physical storyboards and markers, even though PowerPoint had existed for decades. Employees had to spend hours drawing and coloring like kindergartners while their competitors used digital mock-ups. The boardroom always smelled of drying marker fumes and existential angst. It was a policy born of stubbornness, forcing highly paid creatives to waste time gluing foam boards together just because the boss didn't trust those fancy computer machines. 35. Stability is a myth at companies that enforce extreme hot desking. One firm required employees to clear their desks completely every single night. You couldn't leave a photo, a stapler, or even a breath mint. Every morning was a frantic scramble to claim a seat, like a corporate game of musical chairs where the loser has to sit next to the smelly bathroom. It turned the morning routine into gladiatorial combat just to get a window seat. 36. There is micromanagement, and then there is tracking your mouse movements like a hawk. One company implemented a system where if your computer status went to idle for more than 3 minutes, an automated email was sent to your manager. This turned simple tasks like getting a cup of coffee or using the restroom into high-stakes tactical missions. Employees would have to jiggle their mouse, sprint to the break room, pour coffee, and sprint back before the digital snitch could tattle. It wasn't an office, it was a race against the clock with your bladder on the line. 37. Colors are apparently too stimulating for the corporate drone. Imagine an office where using the color printer required specific managerial approval. Black and white was free reign, but if you wanted to print a graph with a single red bar, you needed a business justification and a signature. Employees were terrified to print anything other than grayscale text, lest they be accused of wasting precious, expensive cyan ink. It treated modern technology like it was a scarce resource from the 1950s, making a simple pie chart feel like an act of financial recklessness. 38. Class warfare is alive and well in the break room. A trendy health food cafe chain forbade its employees from drinking water from the nice, filtered customer dispenser. Even during a heat wave, staff were relegated to using a specific, lukewarm tap in the back, conveniently located right next to the mop bucket. It established a clear hydration hierarchy. Customers got the crisp, clean, artisanal water. The people actually doing the work got the pipe juice that tasted like chlorine and despair. It's a great way to remind everyone exactly where they stand on the totem pole. 39. Silence is golden, or at least mandatory. A factory implemented a strict rule that employees were not allowed to speak to each other on the assembly line, citing safety and focus. Since humans are social creatures, communication didn't stop. It just evolved. The workers developed a complex underground sign language. It started as functional signals but quickly morphed into a sophisticated way to complain about the boss and share gossip without making a sound. The management thought they had silenced the floor, but they just created a silent mime troupe of rebellion. 40. This might be the pettiest rule in existence. A company allowed employees to display photos of their children, but with draconian restrictions. The frames had to be smaller than a business card, and each frame could depict no more than one child. If you had triplets, you had a serious Sophie's Choice on your hands. Pick two to banish to the drawer. It turned family affection into a bureaucratic compliance issue. Nothing says, "We value work-life balance," like forcing you to shrink your loved ones down to a wallet-sized, regulated square. 41. Trust is clearly not a core value at this firm. They insisted that all employees end their workday by sending a detailed email to their manager titled Daily Accomplishments and Next Day Goals. It didn't matter if you had been working there for 10 years. You still had to justify your existence every single afternoon. Most of the time, the accomplishment was just manage not to quit despite the crushing micromanagement. It was a homework assignment for adults, designed to make sure nobody went home feeling too relaxed or trusted. 42. Body art is still a taboo for some archaic managers. A financial firm had a strict rule against visible tattoos of any kind. This meant that employees with even small, discreet ink had to keep it covered at all times. During sweltering summer months, while the AC was broken, you would see people wearing turtlenecks and long scarves to hide a tiny butterfly on their neck. It wasn't about professionalism, it was about pretending that people who understand finance couldn't possibly have artwork on their skin. The result was a very sweaty, very miserable workforce. 43. Forward thinking is often code for exhausting. A marketing agency insisted that any internal meeting lasting longer than 20 minutes had to be active. This meant mandatory walking meetings. Picture a group of 4 people trying to take notes and discuss a spreadsheet while doing laps around the hallway like caffeinated mall walkers. It's hard to be strategic when you are out of breath and dodging the cleaning crew. They turned budget discussions into mandatory cardio, proving that multitasking usually means doing 2 things poorly instead of 1 thing well. 44. And here is the fun police in action. A company banned employees from using the office printer for anything primarily for personal amusement, specifically targeting memes and funny pictures. They even designated a print sheriff, who would occasionally audit the printer queue to catch unauthorized outbreaks of joy. Because heaven forbid someone wastes 3 cents of toner to print a picture of a cat to make their cubicle slightly less depressing. It was a crackdown on morale disguised as cost-saving, ensuring the office remained a meme-free zone of gray sadness. 45. Why celebrate your birthday on your actual birthday when you can wait 3 weeks for a corporate mandate? One company decreed that birthday celebrations were inefficient, so they limited them to 1 designated office birthday day per month. If you were born on the 2nd, but the party was scheduled for the 28th, you just had to wait. Your joy had to be batched for efficiency. It turned a personal celebration into a generic, monthly obligation, where everyone gathered to eat stale cake and pretend to care about 6 different people at once. 46. Empathy cannot be automated, but that didn't stop this call center. They had a policy where employees could only use specific, pre-approved empathetic phrases when dealing with angry customers. Deviating from the script to offer genuine human understanding was grounds for disciplinary action. So, instead of a real conversation, you got a robot reading from a list. I understand your frustration. That must be difficult. It sounded about as sincere as a politician's apology. It stripped away humanity and replaced it with a flowchart of approved emotions. 47. Branding is powerful, but banning it on water bottles is paranoid. A retail chain decided that employees could only drink water on the sales floor if it was in a clear, completely unbranded bottle. No logos, no colors, no text. Apparently, seeing a Nike swoosh or a brand name on a plastic bottle was a gateway drug to anarchy. They treated hydration like it was a smuggling operation. Employees had to peel labels off store-bought water like they were hiding evidence, all to protect the sanctity of the store's visual purity. 48. The temperature wars are real. Picture an office where the thermostats were encased in locked, bulletproof glass boxes. The key was held by a manager who apparently had the metabolism of a polar bear. The office was kept at meat locker temperatures, and since employees couldn't adjust the heat, they formed secret alliances. People smuggled in space heaters and electric blankets, building elaborate desk forts to trap warmth. It was like a very beige, very cold version of Game of Thrones, where winter wasn't coming. It was already there, and it was set to 64 degrees. 49. To finish off with pure supervillain energy, there was a CEO at a media company who implemented a strict no eye contact policy. If he walked down the hallway, employees were expected to look down at the floor or physically turn their bodies away. Direct eye contact was considered an act of aggression or an unauthorized attempt at intimacy with leadership. It created an atmosphere where the boss was treated like a gorgon from Greek mythology. One look, and you might turn to stone, or worse, get fired. I am convinced half these managers belong in an asylum. Be honest in the comments. Based on what you just heard, which specific rule would you break on purpose just to see the manager's vein pop? I want to know exactly how you'd get fired from these hellholes. Like the video if you value your sanity, and subscribe for more.